Well, let's talk about litigation hold then. It's probably we can't describe it as being like a super retention policy or a subset of retention policy, but normally litigation hold has kind of a specific meaning in the broader context of discovery, right? It means that when you are notified that you're under litigation, or when once you become aware that you're a party to it, there's certain things you're not allowed to do. And there's a legal term for that, is what, spoliation of evidence, is that what they call it? So that essentially means you're not allowed to modify or delete records that would ordinarily be included in the discovery. If you think about Iran-Contra, right? Oliver North and his secretary stuffing all these paper records into the shredder is a really well-known spoliation of evidence case.
Enron.
And the same thing happens for electronic records, right? So litigation hold is designed to keep people from doing that. Would you say that's a fair?
Yeah, it's designed so that you have a repository of data, be it in place or a separate repository, where that data cannot be touched, where you have litigation hold in the very basic form is alerting everyone, all your custodians or whoever else is in your plan, that these people are now under investigation, under litigation hold, and to secure their data and preserve it. It comes down to preservation is the technical term for it. So you're either going to preserve it by making a copy of it, putting it in a record store, and there's lots of tools that do that, or you can preserve it in place, which is the solution Microsoft has done for their Exchange 2010 implementation. So you have to, but it has to have a process around it. You can't just go to everybody and tap them on the shoulder and say, you need to hold this data. Although people have done it, and it's becoming less defensible now to do that because people do make mistakes and they do delete things and they forget about stuff. And you've seen a lot of recent litigation that, judgments that have come down that really kind of frown on that process. They really want an overall straightforward process to go.
But I mean, wouldn't you say that it's fair that if you're using a version of Exchange or, heaven forbid, Lotus Notes or something like that doesn't include litigation hold? I mean, what are you supposed to do then? Do you do as soon as you become aware, do you take a backup and then lock it in a safe? Is that
essentially
an alternative?
In electronic terms? I mean, what a lot of people will do is create a PST, for example, of the person's mailbox and put that PST in, absent other tools. You can do these in Exchange. You can do any of these tools you can do with the tools that you have right now. So what you can do is you can use Xmerge, create an PST of that mailbox and put that mailbox or that PST in it, what have you, on a secure drive. And you probably want to make a backup of that secure drive in case your media fails, because you do not have an excuse if you say your media has failed. There's actually a recent case where someone had taken a thumb drive, and they said the evidence on the thumb drive, threw it in the drawer, we have it, it's preserved, etc. Well, when they came to get the evidence off of that, thumb drives are not the best media in the world, and they couldn't extract the data. Even forensically, they couldn't extract the data from it. It had been, God only knows what happened to it. However, adverse judgment was set against them for spoliation of data. And this is the type of thing that can happen. So you want to be, not only do you want to be sure, you want to be doubly sure that you have the data.
It's interesting, that's interesting in the context of the safe harbor requirements we talked about earlier, because the safe harbor requires not only that you make a good faith effort, but that you have to apply a reasonable standard of care. And I guess I would certainly argue that if you have something critical, putting it on a thumb drive and putting it in your desk drawer doesn't meet a reasonable standard for
the judge certainly didn't think so.
Yeah, I guess that's ultimately that's you have to convince the judge that you were trying hard. So in Exchange 2010, because we have litigation hold features, it's interesting the way Microsoft implemented it. So if you think about the dumpster, the deleted item retention folder, if you will, that we had earlier. Now there's something similar to that called the recoverable items folder. And when you delete an item, normally it'll go into that recoverable items folder and be recoverable by the user. But what happens when you have litigation hold enabled for a user? What happens to those items when they go in there?
They actually have, if I'm not mistaken, a set of folders, and the place it's going in now is they actually have, and you probably are more in tune with the technical detail of this, but when you put something in litigation hold, it essentially says you cannot delete this. You cannot delete this at all. Putting a flag or in a separate folder, I believe is actually what they're doing with it now, and that is their way of holding in place, it's called. And anything that is with that person. Now, from the user perspective, the user might not see that. The user is not going to see what
when the user deletes a message, it's interesting to point that out, because users who don't know about litigation hold, and frankly most of them won't, right? I mean, most of the end users in the world are not Exchange savvy. If you enable somebody's mailbox for litigation hold, they can immediately go into Outlook and delete. They can try to get rid of all this stuff. But what's really happening is that instead of only going into the deleted items folder, it's also being safeguarded in recoverable items. And users don't have access to that when they're under litigation hold. So they can't see it, they don't see the folder, they can't touch its contents. Now, litigation hold also, it doesn't just apply to deletes. It applies to modifications. And so what Microsoft has done there is implement what they call copy on write. And what that means is that if you have an item in a mailbox and someone edits it, they remove an attachment or they edit the text of it or something like that, then a copy of the modified version of the item is also stored in recoverable items. So during a discovery process, you can go through and you can say, okay, here's the original item, and here are the 5 times that this person changed it. You can recover any one of those individual versions, and you have a log basically showing you the date and time and the responsible user for each one of those changes. So if you need to be able to prove that someone did or did not make a change or did or did not delete something at a particular point in time, then this litigation hold feature gives you that ability. And it sounds like that's fairly important from a legal standpoint, and being able to show that you were safeguarding what you were supposed to.
Absolutely.
preserve.
I mean, even implementing litigation hold, it signs of good faith, etc. And also, all the litigation hold mailboxes or the recoverable items are discoverable under the multi-mailbox search as well. And that was very important because it was previous versions didn't have that. You couldn't go into the dumpsters and search and things like that. So that is very, very important and definitely a big step forward in Microsoft.